going to look at you and be like, hey, why am I not sitting in that session like that guy? He looks really good in that session.
What is it going to take to put you in a session today?
That's right.
Hey, you know what? No money down and no payments for 30 months. No problem. You know, we'll take care of it. Tony will come see you in 30 months. You'll be okay. No problem. Yay. All right. You know what? I'm going to play this now because I can't wait. Because we have to hear banter. And since we're recording, an extra 5 minutes into recording for my what's called outtake shot, which I have from last time, is worthy. Stand by.
Right.
It will now present, and this time I will have my sound on from the get-go. Please enjoy the music.
At AvePoint, we believe the cloud is transforming how we work, making us all more productive and collaborative than ever before. We're here to accelerate and enhance your digital transformation by migrating, managing, and protecting your SharePoint and Office 365 data. Whether you are a Fortune 500 company, government agency, or small business. Supporting your digital transformation and life in the cloud is not a responsibility we take lightly. We are dedicated to providing the highest quality solutions with the highest industry security certifications and the most modern development and operation methodologies. Plus, with our 24/7 global support, it doesn't matter if it's midnight in Paris or midday in New York City. We'll always be there for you. We are ready to help you navigate the challenges of the cloud, whether you're going all in or keeping your data spread across hybrid, cloud, or on-premise systems. AvePoint's not the new kid on the block. We've been a part of this community since 2001. Currently, we've got over 16,000 organizations and 6 million cloud users worldwide who depend on our expert solutions. But enough about us. It's all about successfully navigating you through this digital transformation. So take our hand and let's go on this journey together.
Awesome.
All right. Excellent. Let's see. We got about 15 seconds. So you need any
I'll be right back.
time to exactly. You can teleport. That'd be great. All right, let's just kick this off, shall we? It's alive. Animation techniques that bring to life SPFx and list formatting SharePoint solutions. This is the taste of Chicago. Of course, they have chosen the Children First Fund as the philanthropic opportunity for you. So feel free to donate to that in support of this event. Of course, we also want to thank our sponsors. Even though this is a virtual event, these things do cost money, and there are certain costs that go into making them possible for everyone to be able to attend and speak and all that. So we really appreciate the sponsors that are stepping up to provide that support. And of course, provide your feedback for this session and this event. If the event is bad, you want to say that the session was good. So that way we get, yeah. All right, moving on. My name is David Warner. We're going to have a lot of fun today. As you can see, I'm a sports fan, but I'm an even bigger fan of the community. Things are going to get a little crazy, a little spooky, a little black and white. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions. Love to collaborate with the community. MVP, PNP team member, work for Catapult Systems, and impossible to do this session without him is my co-presenter, Hugo Bernier.
Thank you. Well, you could do it without me, but then the presentation will be quiet about half the time. My name is Hugo Bernier. I'm a former MVP, and I am still a member of the Patterns and Practices team. I say former MVP because I recently joined Microsoft. I've been working with SharePoint ever since it was called Tahoe, and I've been loving it ever since. And today I'm super excited to be talking about animation techniques because this is something that I take that I'm very passionate about. Anyways, we'll talk about it later.
Awesome.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. All right. So what is the agenda for today? Well, animations are something that can be useful, but they can also be a little annoying. So if they're done and used incorrectly, then they're going to frustrate your users, and they're actually going to turn your users off from wanting to use your solution. So we're going to begin by talking about reasons for animation, and we're going to cover a whole host of situational elements that you want to be aware of that are backed by fact, not just opinion that Hugo and I have decided that we want to say is fact. It actually is for real. Then we're going to talk about no-code techniques, low-code techniques, and because we all want sometimes some more code, the best way to say it is mo-code techniques. And we're going to see how you can bring your creations to life. So we're going to go from no-code to low-code to mo-code, and then we're going to bring everything to life. Let's make sure we have some fun. This is obviously based on the Young Frankenstein movie, as you can see there. We have input our own faces and included Parker. So we're going to have some fun with that today. The big question has always been, can you make SharePoint not look like SharePoint? Now, this has been less of a question asked, I guess, in more modern experience with SharePoint. We know that we can't overwrite it completely, right? In the classic world, we could completely, from pixel 00 all the way down to the end of our resolution, completely change the entire solution by overwriting and controlling the master page. Can't do that anymore in modern. But you still want to own a degree of experience that's going to be rich and interactive for your users. And so the question begs to be asked, can that still be done in a modern experience? Well, yes, absolutely can, but you have to get a little more creative. So we're going to discuss some of the things in which you can, and ways in which you can do that today. We're going to discuss who is this for. So these techniques are for power users, non-developers. So we say non-developers because if you can copy and paste, it's going to be successful for you. You're going to be able to take advantage of what we show you today. UI designers, it's important for UI designers as they're creating a solution, designing a solution, to know what is capable within the ecosystem of SharePoint, Teams, and the Microsoft 365 landscape. And of course, for those SPFx developers out there that want to have that full control opportunity within the comfort of their own code world, we got your back as well. So to begin talking about how animations enhance the user experience, let's hand it over to Hugo Bernier.
Well, thank you, David. So let's use an example here of an actual out-of-the-box web part, the countdown web part, right? It's available in SharePoint, and it counts down to a deadline. Now, they could have displayed the date and the time and be done with it, but by simply making it count to a deadline, what it does is it brings your attention to it, it conveys the deadline's approaching, and it brings a sense of urgency or importance to the event. You might say it's not even an animation, that's simply changing the time, and you'd be right, but your eye perceives the change on the page and it brings your attention to it. And that's what we're going to try to do with micro animations today. We're going to convey animations in a subtle way, but without being distracting. And by the way, we're running through a whole bunch of samples here and a whole bunch of demos. We're not going to be sharing like the code because I mean, we'd have to do an entire session just on one piece of the code here. But all the code that we're showing today is going to be available. So you just need to reach out to us and we'll help you get it. This is all available for you. All right, so let's talk about how to do some of these animations. So, well, before we talk about how, why would you want to use animations, right? When is it a good time to use animations? The first one is you want to use animations or micro animations to illustrate that an action is being processed, right? The problem is that your users want to know when an action is done. And so by just slightly changing a button or a user interface element to illustrate that the action has been processed, that you actually clicked on it, or that you hovered over something, is a great way to let the user know that we've got them, right? We've got them covered. The other thing that you want to do is you want to use animation to show that an operation is in progress. So for example, this little thing here, when I'm dragging to refresh, it actually shows a little cute animation. And it just, again, it's one way to convey that something is happening and it's just gradually updating. You also want to help people visualize how long an action will take. Right? So if I can't see the progress, I don't understand how long something will take. But if you're able to illustrate that and you're able to convey that with some subtle animations, it distracts the user, first of all, and we'll show some examples of that very soon. But that's the whole point, right? It's just to make it a more enjoyable experience. Sometimes you just want to focus the user's attention on crucial things. Because as a user, I have a tendency to want to focus on the key things first. And the thing, as a designer of this application, I want to make sure that I can control where people are looking first. So in this case, what we're doing is we're boiling down the information to what's most important. Is it going to be sunny, cloudy, rainy, snowy, whatever, right? And that's the example of this animation. You also want to make interactions feel more natural. Notice how when in this animation, when we move the list, the objects on the list move in a way that's consistent with how things would move if they were in real life placed on a conveyor belt and we move the belt. By making things feel more natural, users feel that your application is more instinctive. And that's because it works more like the things that they're familiar with. And therefore, they think it's more user-friendly. And there's actually lots of research that's been done on that. Also, a little tip is the more you spend time to make sure your application looks good, the more your users will feel that it's user friendly. And yeah, that's it, user friendly. I forgot what I was going to say there. There you go. All right. One last thing is make things more exciting. So if your screen and your page is boring, people will get bored quickly and they won't pay attention. But sometimes you want to create some incentive for people to do the right thing. Let's say you have a task that you want your users to do frequently, but you know they just don't want to do it because it's painful, it's boring. Like, I don't know, doing your timesheet or, whatever the other things. I don't know. I don't have any examples of boring things. But by adding a little bit of animation, you can introduce delight and make people do things that they don't want to do. I know it sounds like a weird concept, but trust me, by adding a little bit of delight will just bring people, it just makes it less painful. I'll use an example, right? Angry Birds is not necessarily a painful game, or Candy Crush, for example. They were popular, but they were a huge waste of time, and at least for me, they were a huge waste of time. But one of the reasons why people spend so much time is they just delighted the users and made them want to continue playing with just cute little animations and cute graphics and things like that. And we can use micro animations to do the same, to not to waste time, obviously, but to encourage people to come back and do the same thing. But there are some rules. Like everything else, there are some guidelines. Let's talk about those guidelines. The first thing is the frequency. So consider how often users will see this animation, right? The first time the animation may seem novel and it might, it will probably delight your users. However, novel and delightful can quickly become an annoyance after a while. So just make sure that you don't repeat the same animation over and over and over again or reuse it too often. Consider using different animations sometimes. The duration, how long the animation lasts, is also important. If it's too fast, people might not notice it. And if it's too slow, well, people might not also notice it, or even worse, they might actually think that the system is sluggish. So let's look at the magic timeline here. If we zoom in and we look at, this is between 0 to 1 second. This is what happens. So anything below 100 milliseconds, it appears instant to users. So if you make an animation too fast, it'll just look instant and people won't notice that you spent all this effort on an animation. It takes about 150 to 350 milliseconds for users to understand that there's an animation happening. If you make your animations between 200 and 500, I'm having a hard time today, 500 milliseconds, you're ensuring that your users will actually notice your animations and that it registers. So let's just take a moment here, because if you've ever tried to do animations in CSS, you may have just been randomly picking up numbers. I know I certainly have been. I've been copying animations from somewhere that I found inspiring, just put the timing there and, just kind of whatever it came up to, that was the animation. But understanding, again, that if you can make your animation between 200 milliseconds and 500 milliseconds, you'll actually do an animation that people will notice and that they will be able to enjoy. Speed is also important. So we talked about kind of how long it lasts, but the speed, when we're talking about the speed is like when you repeat something, for example, it can actually affect the perceived performance. Slower animations will lead the users to perceive that the system is slow, even if your system performs the same speed. And we'll show you a demo of that shortly. Animations can be used to hide delays by keeping the user engaged, and we've talked about that, and the perceived performance increases. But loading animations can actually keep the users occupied with visual feedback as a result. And obviously, as a result, they perceive a shorter wait time. The number of cycles in an animation can also increase the perceived speed. So Facebook, for example, has a skeleton, or it's a skeleton content when loading an animation. And it's actually a very subtle thing. You might not ever have noticed it, but it's an elegant solution, and it replaces the traditional loading spinner. And there's a study by Viget that found that people would actually be willing to wait longer for a cool branded custom animation over the generic ones. So keep that in mind, right? And if your system tends to be a bit sluggish because you're calling APIs, this is a great way to distract users. We also have to consider accessibility, right? And this is something that David, I'm sure, can talk to us about. But people can get sick with motion sickness. That's why that's why iOS 7 gives you the option to turn off parallax effect, because parallax is this concept where the background and the foreground can be moving at different speeds, and sometimes that can actually trigger sickness. So, and we don't want to trigger sickness. We don't want our users to be caught off guard. No big play automations there. And that's the key here. Don't start an animation unless it was triggered by a user. Now, triggering something by a user could mean that the users just entered the page. That's triggering the action, or they moused over something, or they clicked on something. Don't just randomly do it, just, for fun. That's never good. David, do you have anything else to say on?
No, just other than the fact that it is a real thing. Like, I can't actually play Minecraft or games like that with my kids because it actually affects me motion sickness wise, which is unexplainable why, because I'm not moving. But yeah, it is a real thing. So we want to care about the users.
So I guess I should return that VR headset that over birthday.
Dang it.
So people with motion sickness can actually indicate whether they want motion, right? And you can use CSS to automatically hide or show animations based on the user's preference by adding, without adding any additional code, as long as you don't consider CSS code. So here's a CSS animation that makes something pulse every 1 second. Again, based on what we've talked about, it's probably not a good idea to pulse something infinitely every 1 second, but let's just pretend that that's the animation that we chose for our solution. Now, if you wanted to make this more accessible, what you could do is you can actually add an @media query and say @media prefers reduced motion. And then we can change the animation. So in this case, we're saying, look, if someone hasn't indicated they prefer reduced motion, we're going to do a 1 second pulse infinite. But if someone says that they prefer reduced motion, then we're just going to use a dissolve animation. Here's an example of what not to do. Now, I'm not criticizing this site. I actually love this site. I just think it's awesome. Oh, it's not animating as much as normal. There is so much going on this site. I strongly recommend that you go take a look at it. But like, stuff is moving all the time. You just can't, it's amazing. Anyways, let's look at a real life example of using animation in a SharePoint Framework web part. So this is a web part that I've demoed in the past in the community calls and a few other events, but it's a web part that allows you to, I create this web part for a college that allows their student to upload their photo ID. And obviously, because they're students, I mean, these are the same people that were saying don't eat Tide Pods. So we had to kind of create some logic to prevent them from uploading inappropriate pictures. So rated R pictures, pictures of people wearing, whatever, funny stuff, sunglasses, hats, pictures of their kids. People uploaded pictures of their dogs and things like that. And they had someone approving the pictures, like someone full-time just reviewing the pictures to approve them. So what we did is we did a web part that actually calls Azure Cognitive Services, and it goes and scans the picture and returns results. So let's just show what happens when I actually start the picture. There you go. So now I actually submit the picture. And it's, it's calling the system and it's saying, yeah, this picture, it says I'm 45, yeah. And yes, it's a portrait. There's only one face and so on and so forth, right? And I was keeping my clothes on for that picture, so that's good. But now, the one thing you may have noticed is it was kind of sluggish. I was obviously distracting you by talking, but it was kind of sluggish because it's calling the API behind the scenes and we don't have control over how long the API takes. Well, let's actually go and let's take a picture of a better looking person and let's submit that picture. Now, the API is going to take the same amount of time, exactly the same amount of time as it did before. But here we did a quick animation that just did like a little scanning thing. Like it was almost like the Terminator, right? Scanning the image and it returned the results. Now, it may have seemed a bit faster, but it was not faster. But the problem is that scanning line was actually kind of slow. It felt sluggish a little bit. So let's actually do the same animation with, again, we'll use my picture again, but let's do the same animation, but now with a bit a faster cycle. And let's look at this. All right, so now it scans, so it returns results eventually. There you go, right? And so the interesting thing here is all three of these animations took the exact same amount of time, but the animation kind of helped reduce that perceived sense of delay. All right, so how are we going to go from there, right? How do we build these kinds of animation? And this is where I think my friend David, you want to start talking about this, or do you want me to talk about the next?
Why not? Let's jump right into no-code techniques. Now, you may be saying, what is no-code? Because that sounds a little bit like snake oil, right? Well, you know what? You're absolutely right. It's not really existing. There is very little no-code opportunity in the world when it comes to technology. But for the purposes of this solution and session today, no-code is going to refer specifically to your ability to copy and paste. Now, we know everybody can copy and paste because what we're going to focus on in this section of the session is the ability to take something from a repository or a library of solutions that are available to you for absolutely free to utilize in production, development, training, learning, all of the above. And all you need to do is copy and paste. So let's dive directly into a no-code demo and see what you can do with that. We're going to jump over to our It's Alive site here, and we're going to begin by looking at a list. Now, this is a list formatting experience. What we've done is created a list formatting definition. You can see it here, in which we've created this Polaroid-like look and feel. It simply takes the list information, and there's really nothing, no smoke and mirrors here, no magic. If I were to preview it back to what you see, it is truly a list. We're just simply using a list formatting definition to provide a little bit more visually appealing look and feel. But it doesn't do a whole lot. And we certainly don't want to send people directly to the list to be able to consume this information. So in the modern experience, you can actually have a page, which I've moved over to here. It's an actual page. And when I edit it, it is using the list web part, right? So if I click this web part, we can see this is the list web part, completely available to you out of the box. You can identify the list, the view where we can see the list formatting definition has bubbled up, and we can hide the command bar, which we've done, and that's great. But again, fairly simplistic, right? Not a whole lot going on here. What can we do to provide some animated experiences for our users? Well, because this is HTML that we own, remember in the list over here, we're writing out the HTML for this particular experience, which means that we can identify things like class attributes and identify exactly something that we can hook into within our page. But what can we use to add CSS to this page? Well, we can certainly write a big SPFx extension or something like that, but we've got you covered. There is a web part that is available to you called the Enhanced List Formatting web part. This is a patterns and practices web part, completely free. And what it does when placed on a page is it first provides you with some warnings. Now, this is a very powerful web part, but with great power comes great responsibility. You can use this for evil, but we trust that you won't, because if you write CSS that overrides classes that you don't own, that Microsoft can change, what's going to happen? Well, let's take a look. This is much like the GPS warning in your car. If you misuse this web part, you're going to have loss of styles applied. When Microsoft changes their styles, yours are going to break. So we're going to see broken styles. People are going to say, why is SharePoint always broken? That's going to result in tears, nightmares, and blue screens of death. And nobody wants that. So use this in the superhero-like way we know you will. Hit accept. And what it provides to us is the ability to add custom styles. So we see that panel popped out over here on the right. You could certainly open it in a full screen editor, which gives you a little more room. We see that if I start typing in here, like class name, we can see there is some nice IntelliSense. It is a nice experience. But again, we're not typing anything from scratch. What we're going to do is we're going to take some classes, CSS, that's it, and I'll even show you just simple CSS right here, 55 lines of CSS that we're going to copy over, nothing more, nothing less, nothing up this sleeve, nothing up that sleeve. I don't even have sleeves, and we're going to hit save. Now notice what's happened. The first thing we'll see is that things have gone a little askew. Right? So all of the cards or the Polaroids have turned a little bit, making it a little bit more realistic in how they may be displayed on a page. And if I click in here, I can actually hover over each of them. And then as I hover over each of them, it brings that particular Polaroid to the forefront, a little bit more above the others. So it accentuates the actual view of what it is you're looking at, brings it to the focal point of your eye because it's being brought closer to you. But wait, there's more. We can do even more. So I'm going to take another collection of CSS. This time it's 63 lines of code. I'm going to come into my change custom styles. I'm going to just select all delete, and I'm going to click in there. And because I'm editing in the panel, I don't need to click save. I just need to click out of it. Now, once I've done that, you'll notice that something's changed. Well, the first thing you'll notice immediately is the colors are gone. The colors of the images are toned down to just black and white. Additionally, the font has been changed. Now, when we had Polaroids, or maybe they're kind of coming back as a retro device, you draw on them, right? You write your name on them, you write the year, event, etc. So now we're using a font that looks a little bit more realistic in terms of a handwritten name. So it adds a little flair there. We change it to black and white, but notice what happens when we hover it over it this time. Now we're actually not only bringing it to the forefront, we're changing it from black and white to color. So now the focal point of your eye definitely goes to what has been zoomed in on, because not only are we increasing the size, we're bringing the color to life for that particular Polaroid. And as I move around each one of these, it's a nice effect that brings and highlights the specific community contributor that we're hovering over. But wait, there's more. We're actually able to add additional click events to this. Now you may say, wait a second, I thought you said no code. You're absolutely right. You can do click events with CSS. So I'm going to replace this. I'm going to click out so we see it goes back to normal. I'm going to paste in some CSS, and this is where you can see we're starting to use things like keyframes. And of course, we saw that heart class that we talked about. So we're going to utilize that. And now that I've clicked out of there, notice what's happened. It's gone back to black and white. It's gone to the font. It's askew. I can hover over it, but we see that there's a little font that's showing up there. Or excuse me, a little heart that's showing up there. What does that do? Well, when I hover over it, notice what's happening. We're kicking off an animation that happens when we hover over this particular item. And it is causing that sprite to kind of bubble out and make it look like it's an actual heartbeat. This is all pure CSS, no JavaScript, absolutely none. So we could actually make this like, I don't know, a hyperlink if we wanted to within our JSON to connect out to something that maybe is a flow and identifies this when we click on it as a favorite. Maybe a favorite of someone we want to watch. Maybe it's a list of people internally or follow or something like that. So no code at all, absolutely none. Now, how do we make all this happen? Let's look at the resources that we utilized. So we use these list formatting samples. That Polaroid one is available to you for free, absolutely free. We also use the list formatting enhancer web part of another one that's available to you for free at aka.ms/SPFx web parts. Both of these things are absolutely available to you at no cost. You can use them, they're production worthy, and they're supported by the community. Well, let's step the game up a little bit. Let's move into the low code technique opportunity. So what exactly is low code? Well, it's interactive user-driven triggers. So now we're going to step up a little bit beyond no code to low code. So we're going to look to utilize the same things we were in no code, HTML, CSS, but now we're going to include JavaScript. So we're going to combine HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but there's no SPFX required here. right? Now you don't have to go compile your own web part or extension. The tools we're going to show you how to utilize here are completely available to you for free as we're going to use them today. So let's dive into a low code demo. We'll go back to our page here and we'll move over to our low code techniques. Now what I'm using here, I'm going to kick the page into edit view and we're going to look at the web part that we're using. We're no longer using the list web part. We're now using the modern React content query web part. Now you may remember this from Classic. It was useful. It used XSL behind the scenes to render out the data, which was not useful. In fact, most people didn't even know how to use XSL. I remember interviewing someone once and saying, well, how well do you know XSL? And they said, I use Microsoft Excel all the time. So many people didn't even know exactly what it was. It was hard to use. In the modern React content query web part, though, you still have all the goodness of the content query web part, which allows you to scope to a direct list, actually cross-site collection, which is awesome. That wasn't available in Classic. You can fill, you can sort, you can filter, you can define what fields you want, and then you have access to what's called a template. Now, this is what's called a handlebars template. Now, if you're not familiar with handlebars, don't let it overwhelm you. Simply HTML. Nothing more. HTML and CSS. And what you're able to do is point to a custom handlebar template, which is what we're doing right here. And we're not going to get deep into the code because we don't want to overwhelm you, but it's basic HTML. And in addition to that, we're able to reference external scripts. So in this case, we're pulling in jQuery. We know it's maybe a little more antiquated library for usage, but it is still popular. So we want to show how simply you could include it. And then we're calling out a JS file, which allows us to create functions that our HTML can call or our handlebar template can call. So what does this allow us to do when we republish this page? It means that we're controlling the HTML and the CSS and now the JavaScript, but we don't need SPFx. We're not compiling our own web part. We're using one that's already built for us. I'm going to refresh again because you'll notice one of the things that happens on these cards is there's a little bit of a focal point on the name, right? So it kind of focuses into view. So it's a nice little soothing animation that occurs on load of the page. Now, the heart, what happens? Well, you'll notice when I click on it, now it stays perpetual. It's not just a hover event that happens via CSS hover. It is now actually changing things via JavaScript when I click on it. Now, Hugo talked about the fact that you wouldn't want things to go forever. We certainly wouldn't. So as you see, as I click on all of these, they are going to go on perpetually, which could get very annoying. So again, great power comes great responsibility. And at this point, they're beating at different rates. So it could be that you just have them beat once or twice and then maybe just stay red as opposed to going back to gray. But again, you can use this as a way to now kick off a flow, connect to an API, do some sort of information gathering that you might want. And it's now interactive. But wait, there's more. If you would like, you can also utilize the JavaScript to provide additional data about the people or the content that you're displaying. What do we mean by that? We're going to another page here for low code 2. It's the exact same experience that we've seen, but now instead, when we hover over the card, we're going to use animations, and this is all from HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We're going to use animations that actually display additional data about our particular community contributor here. So when I hover over, notice what happens. Now I'm able to zoom into the photo, but zoom out on some content, right? So I'm just kind of using an animation to transpose in a nice way the data that might be cluttered if we show it about every single user on the screen all at once. Now we're using the user decision to hover over a user or a community contributor here and display more information. In this case, we could display information about the member, their name, follow on Twitter. It's a link that could go out to their Twitter account. You'll notice the heart is still there, so I can still hover over that. I can still click on it, even though I'm hovered and seeing more information. When I go off, it goes back to the photograph, persists on the heart, and we're good to go. Same thing with all these others. So if I heart Hugo, heart April, right, the sharing is caring team, minus Louisa here, we're doing great. Now I'm able to take advantage of all these techniques that we've talked about. And again, we're still not writing any custom SPFx. We're simply using tools that are available to you for free, but we're using them in a way that provides additional level of enhanced experience for our users by providing an animated experience that's not just a simple click. Now it's a little bit more enjoyable for them to interact with and be a part of. All right, so what are the tools that we took advantage of here in this particular part of the session, the low-code resources? Well, we use that content query web part, aka.ms/SPFX web parts. Now, for those animations that you saw that were flying in and out and zooming in and out, a resource that we used is called Animista. And I believe Hugo's going to potentially, if we have time, demo that for you. But what's very cool about this resource is it's completely free on the web. Using a wizard-like interface allows you to say, I want my animation to do a zoom, and I want it to go from no drop shadow to drop shadow when I hover, and I want it to take 5 seconds. And what happens is when you configure all that through a nice little WYSIWYG wizard, it'll spit out the CSS for you, the HTML for you, and all you need to do is copy and paste and maybe change the class names or change the structure of the HTML to be a little more applicable for what your use case is. Completely free, awesome resources. There's lots of them like that. We just particularly liked Animista as we were doing the research for this session, so we think you will as well. Well, now let's step it up a little bit and let's go from that no code to low code to mo code with my Mo than friend Hugo.
Let me see if I can get rid of that little annoying thing. There you go. All right. So again, let's just do a little recap here because I think it's important. We've taken some data from a list. We used list formatting to actually change the look and feel of that list. And we've added animation without any, well, with very little code in the case of the JavaScript, or with no code in the case of just using CSS. And that's important here because when we started building this session, we wanted to make sure that people understood, like, it is possible to do some really cool stuff without writing any custom code. Now, what we're going to start talking about here is, okay, so what if I wanted to do a little bit more? What if I wanted to do advanced animations? What if I wanted to do things like SharePoint web part or something like that, right? And introduce that in other things. So Mo code here, we're talking about things like SPFx development. We're talking about things like advanced animation frameworks. And so those are libraries that are available to you to actually do some cool stuff. Like it could be things like, I don't know, physics-driven animations, right? So if you wanted to use particle animations and things like that. And I have to say, when we first designed the session, we designed it to be for shorter sessions, but we wanted people to be inspired. We wanted people to look at this and to say, hey, you know, I got an idea. I'm going to go do this. And now that I know it's possible and it is supportable, I'm going to go and do this. And it's amazing. But we have so many different samples of web parts that we could have gone through here, including some 3D stuff. It's really crazy, right? But let's start doing some Mo code demo. All right, so Mo code techniques. Actually, before we do that, I had a shortcut for Animista and I forgot to load it. There you go, animista.net. David talked about Animista. There's lots of websites like this, by the way, that are resources available to you. But Animista is one of those things. I don't know if you say Animista or Animista, so I just toggle back and forth between calling it whichever. So like this one site is very cool because you can actually go to pretty much any animation and it'll do some cool things, right? Doesn't matter what it is. And there's all sorts of things like entrances. We got exits, right? I'm just clicking around here to show you some examples. But just a little, again, they're supposed to be micro animations. So you can actually see some things like this one here is an animation that we completely copied and pasted from Animista for our demo. So there's very cool stuff here that you can do. But probably the best part is you can configure it. And then once you're done, you can actually just copy and paste the CSS, right? It'll copy the class for you. It'll copy the keyframes for you as if it's an animation. So, you know, you don't even have to build the animation, really. You just kind of go find something that looks like what you want. You copy and paste the classes and put it all together. And you know what? that's innovation, right? Putting existing things in a new context, that's a form of innovation. So don't be ashamed of doing that. It's perfectly fine. So we wanted to do something interesting. So we started looking at some animation libraries that were available out there. One of the ones that you might or might not be familiar with is GreenSock. And GreenSock is, or I think people call it GSAP, right? And GSAP is a great library. It's unfortunately you have to pay for it. And by the way, David and I are not sponsored by GreenSock or anything like that. It's just a library that we like to use, but it's got some really cool features in it. As you can see, this is all done with GSAP, and it's got tons of sample code that you can use. Now, some of these are more for big animations, not necessarily for micro animations, but we found a library here called Draggable. And Draggable is a library that allows us to do just that, right? It allows us to drag stuff around. And it allows us to create a size tiles that are of a standard size and move them around. So imagine now, what if I had a roster of people? And throughout this demo, this presentation, we've been doing demos of people and people in the community. So what if, I don't know, I wanted to create a queuing system, right? So here's the people in a queue, or maybe here's a call chain, right? I want these people to be called in this order, or an approval process. I want these people to be approving something in this order. And you wanted to make that experience a bit more exciting. Well, if you take a look at the sample here from GreenSock, it actually shows you, all the HTML that you need, the CSS that you need, and the JavaScript that you need. So we actually took that, and using that web part that David just demonstrated before, we just added some cool stuff. So I don't know, maybe I should show you what it does first, and then we'll show you the code. So here, I can just, again, imagine that this is an approval process, and I want to say, well, the first person that needs to approve this is Emily. Then it's April, then it's Katie, then it's Michelle. I can just move stuff around like this, back and forth. And then, this is not even a SharePoint Framework web part. This is actually just using the exact same techniques that David and I just showed you before. And let's see, if I click, I can show you how this is done behind the scene. So this web part here. Right, so it's the same content query web part that we built. Again, it's not that you can't do it in a SharePoint framework. It's just that in this case, you didn't have to do it in SharePoint framework. Trust me, if you start doing stuff in SharePoint framework, you can go even crazier. Again, we've talked about 3D modeling and things like that. You can absolutely do that. We just didn't find a valid scenario to demonstrate 3D web parts in here. But here's what we did. We did a new template. This is the template that we use here. So the MoCode template. Let's see if he'll actually show it to me. It doesn't want to show it to me. I was going to show it to you. It was in a sharing mood today, but I guess it doesn't want to let me be in a sharing mode. I'll open it later. And then the other thing that we did is we added the same JavaScript that we had before, or jQuery. Except that now we added also, and if only I had a way to zoom in. David showed me a cool trick. There you go. So here I can actually go to this one here. I'm still learning, guys. David, there you go.
Shift. Or yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Yes, I did my first rectangle. So you can actually use GSAP. So I loaded the GSAP library here, and then I also loaded the GSAP is GreenSock animation. I loaded the draggable one as well. So here's the draggable. Okay, I'll skip highlighting the draggable. I was one rectangle was too much for me. And then we have a MoCode.js, which actually is really the JavaScript that you saw before. This one here. is this JavaScript that I imported into here, and I tweaked it a little bit, obviously, because I wanted to work with SharePoint. Now, in this sample, when we built the sample, because we wanted everyone to be able to use these samples as is, it doesn't write back anything. It doesn't go to the library, and it doesn't make any update. But obviously, that would be the next logical thing. You don't want to just drag stuff around just for the fun of it. You want it to actually drag around and make changes. But that's really all there is here. So we're using some fancy libraries, but we're using some very basic web parts to actually do, or some, well, I don't want to say out of box, but some simple web parts, some CSS, JavaScript, and HTML to do the kind of animations that we want. All right, so let's review what we did here. So we used the content query modern web part, which again, David pointed out is available at aka.ms/SPFx webparts. We also used greensock.com, and we actually have the greensock pens or the demos that are available to you if you want. And we used the draggable library to do that. Let's look at some animation technique resources as well. So again, the same web parts. I know we've listed that URL about 17 times now, but it's really kind of the secret sauce here. We also use animista.net and greensock.com. Again, Greensock is not free. There are other libraries out there that are available for free. And we should probably come up with a free version of this sample at some point. But again, we wanted to show the full spectrum here. And the crazier you go in terms of animations and 3D models and things like that, obviously, the more difficult it is to get some free resources to do that.
They do actually have a free version of Greensock. It's just not as robust. So that's what Hugo's referring to, is the super duper physics driven, all that kind of stuff is a yearly license. It's not bad. It's like $80 a year, maybe, I think. So it's not like it's insane. Definitely cheaper than some other software solutions we've seen or services. But they're always updating it, always adding new stuff. And there is a free version, and all those code pins, like the one that Hugo showed you, you can play with for free. You can create your own code pins to play around with it, even for the pay only, the licensed only version, you can still play with that through a code pin. They will allow you to reference their CDN from code pin for the full, more robust version, so you can play with it before you even decide you want to pay for the license for it. So there is some value added there to kind of see if it works for you for that extra physics stuff.
Well, one of the things that I always tell my clients when it comes to acquiring solution components, the tendency is to say, oh, we're just going to build something from scratch, or they'll say, oh, buy versus build. You know what? There's another model, which is reuse first, right? Reuse what's available out there because you already have it built into your system, like some of the list formatting thing that we showed you, or because it's available as an open source solution or a sample, right? Using something like Animista to find a sample. Then if you can't reuse, then buy. Usually it's probably the best solution. So buying a library like whatever, and again, I'm not going to mention the name again because I don't want to sound like we're endorsing them. Just buy a library out there because the cost that David mentioned, it's less than a single developer for an hour probably. And you've got all these cool features. And then build. And where you want to focus on building is building the things that make you unique, right? That's where you want to focus your effort. And that's usually the best way to achieve the kind of transformations and innovations that you want that will keep you competitive out there. All right. So with that, David, what are we saying here?
That's what we are. Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for attending. This has been a feature-packed, a lot of information thrown at you at once. Again, we, as Hugo said, we're really only scratching the surface of what can be done here. And we're doing that on purpose because, one, we'll come out with a more advanced session soon, but at the same time, we don't want you to get overwhelmed because there is a lot to animation, and it can be overwhelming when you start thinking about keyframing and all of that, and then you combine different animation transformations and transports and all of that with different keyframes and sequencing, it can get overwhelming fast. But we want you to just take away from what you've seen so far, everything that we accomplished can be accomplished by just taking advantage of pre-existing solutions that are out there. And so that's the takeaway, is that you can leave here today without feeling like, oh, well, that was cool, but I have to go learn a whole, PhD in keyframing of CSS. No, that's not it at all. There are tools that will do it for you, so use them.
Absolutely. And it's also, I guess it's our secret way of trying to get in more conferences by having follow-up sessions of this. Is that what you're saying, David?
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
That's right. All right. Thank you, everyone. I can't see the chat, but I think David has access to the chat.
Yeah. No questions. Kent Warner said excellent. Thank you, guys. So you're welcome.
It's
Thank
mostly
you
me being smarmy, doing all my little side comments, as you probably are so familiar with. You're like, oh God, there he goes again.
Life would not be what it is without him.
There he goes again. He's putting all these little itty bits of little snippets of stuff that people have no reference to because no one is old. Hey, that was a great session, folks. Come on, let's have some applause because maybe we're streaming, maybe we're not. You go up here and you go clap, clap. There we go. Applause. There we go.
Thank you.
Now we're talking. We're talking.
Well, people are still awake. That's good.
That's right. Now, here's the thing. It's Friday on a weekend at the end of the period. The Europeans, if they're still up, they're crazy people. The rest of us over here, if we're here on a Friday, we're actually crazier because our spouses and parental units are now looking at us like, what the heck are you doing? Right? And we are the absolute diehards. For those who are here, for those about to watch the next session, I salute you. You rock.
Yeah,
I am Spartacus.
But Hugo and Dave, of course, they are the ultimate gladiators to be ready for battle at any moment, at any time. The Emperor just calls on them whenever it's possible.
Are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained? Yes.
As long as the attendees are not going like this. Yep.
Yeah.
They seek blood, but not yours, fortunately.
That's right.
Excellent.
There you go. That's what we wanted. Thank you.
Yes, please show us your thumbs. Wait,
So
I'm sorry. Sound
So again, all the stuff that we've showed you today, you can just reach out to us. We have our Twitter information here and our blogs. Feel free to reach out to us if you just need some inspiration, some ideas on how to get started using animations. Just don't let your user interfaces be boring. Don't go crazy, but don't let your user interfaces be boring. Engage your users, and they'll just love your applications.
You're here.
Yes, awesome. Thank you.
All right, thank you all again.